The state of Arizona and Adelita Grijalva have sued the United States House of Representatives. Why? Because MAGA Mike Johnson refuses to swear her in, even though she won the election fair and square by a wide margin. And there's precedent about why he can't do this. He calls it an exception. He says he's not going to follow it. He talks about the Pelosi rule and other nonsense. These are just excuses because we've seen MAGA Mike Johnson do this before. We've seen him make these exceptions for Republicans, but he won't do it because he's very scared. And his boss, Donald Trump, the leader of his party, is afraid that the Epstein files are going to come out once they get her sworn in. So I don't know what their long-term plan is because eventually they're going to have to swear her in. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. Today we're talking about the lawsuit that was filed by the Attorney General of the state of Arizona and by Adelita Grijalva herself on civil action on the Legal AF network. Before we go on, before we jump into this exciting topic, hit that subscribe button if you like this content so you can keep up with us. Brian, where do we start with this issue?
Well, let's start with the Constitution of the United States of America, shall we?
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's something that Donald Trump apparently has never read, and I'm now wondering if Mike Johnson's ever read it. So the Constitution of the United States specifically doesn't say that the Speaker can choose when and if and how and where to swear somebody in. What it basically says is that if you're elected as a member of the House of Representatives of the United States, you have an absolute right to be seated and to fulfill the will of the people. Now, we know that deep in his heart, Mike Johnson actually believes that. How do we know that, Shant? That's because Mike Johnson was apparently not too long ago on a TV program, and he was being interviewed, and someone asked him a hypothetical question about George Santos, the felon, now pardoned or commuted felon.
But a felon nonetheless. Yeah, we'll go on.
Is the hypothetical question, what would happen if he were elected again back to the House of Representatives? And Mike Johnson said, well, that's the will of the people, and we'd have to seat him because that's the will of the people, and it's the people's house, and they have the absolute right. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that's effectively what he said. So he's admitted that the almost 800,000 people, of which 70%, Shant,
huge margin,
voted for Ms. Grijalva. Right, huge
certified results too. There's no question about whether there's no nonsense about whether there was election interference or fraud or something like certified result. Nobody disputes that she got elected by that margin. By the way, we'll go on.
Right, and let me return to the Constitution. The Constitution does set out the grounds by which somebody cannot be seated or can be thrown out, which is if there's a dispute over age, citizenship, residency, those issues. Nothing there. I've read the Constitution. I went to law school. I don't remember a Jeffrey Epstein exception to the Constitution, right? I don't remember that one that says if someone's going to vote to release records relating to Jeffrey Epstein, we don't have to seat them. So maybe that's.
Are you sure there's no exception that says the president of the United States might have been involved in sex crimes? Therefore,
let me check. I have my Constitution here. Let me check really quickly.
No.
There's no Jeffrey Epstein or if the president's allegedly involved in sex crimes. But I think that's a good place for us to pivot to talk about why it's quite possible why Mike Johnson doesn't want to seat Ms. Grijalva because of Jeffrey Epstein. So let's take it from there, Shant.
Well, because she would be the vote that basically forces the decision on getting the discharge petition to release the documents related to the Epstein investigation. And Republicans are terrified of this because Donald Trump is terrified of this. Look, here's my editorial comment on this. In my heart of hearts, I believe that all these Republicans, they would love nothing more than this thing to come out and all the bad actors to be revealed. And if Trump is involved, for him to get in trouble for that. I don't think, but they're so afraid of retribution. So they are doing everything. They're risking life and limb to make sure that Donald Trump is protected.
Let's drill down on this a little bit. So first of all, I want to be very clear to people listening to this so that folks can intelligently discuss. And I think that's one of our main functions here is that so people listen to this can intelligently talk about the law. It isn't to automatically release the records. She would be the 218th signature, joining a small but vocal group of Republicans on a petition that would force a floor vote, which would force every single member of Congress to say yes or no about the unredacted, privileged, just the complete and absolute release of all the records from the Department of Justice. And I think there's a huge fine, like a $10 million a day fine that Congress would impose on the Department of Justice if they didn't turn over the records in 48 hours.
It's to force a vote. Yeah, it's to force a vote. It wouldn't be her getting sworn in and whatever vote she immediately casts wouldn't automatically release the Epstein files or something. It would be the 218th vote, and that would tip the scales to force for a discharge petition to force a floor vote. But what really terrifies Republicans about that is that I don't think they could win that floor vote. I think many of them would have to vote in favor of releasing the files, because who is going to stand up there and say, no, I don't think these things should become publicly released? It would sort of turn on a bright spotlight on the Republicans that are protecting sexual predators like Jeffrey Epstein.
And I think that's a very valuable point to drill down on, Shant, which is, I've heard these Republicans come on TV now, particularly someone like Mike Johnson, who says, the Democrats want this. They want to create a controversy. They want to have a conspiracy about this. Where were the Democrats before yelling about Jeffrey Epstein? Well, they didn't have to yell about Jeffrey Epstein because the Republicans ran on this. This was Kash Patel, Donald Trump, all of these people. So many of these elected Republicans said one of the things they were going to do when they got into Congress was absolutely release the records. They have such short memory, Shant. Why do you think they have short memories?
I mean, I don't think it's a short memory. I think they like to go with things that help them in that moment. And right now, it was a sexy and easy to sell talking point. We're gonna drain the swamp and release the Epstein files and all the deep state, the folks that are being protected by the deep state. That was a great talking point for them to run on. Well, it turns out that Donald Trump may be that part of that deep state. He may be part of those pedophiles or sexual predators. Maybe. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying he may be involved in Epstein and Epstein's dealings. And now they're terrified because they're like, oh crap, one of our own. In fact, the head honcho of this party might be implicated here. So they need to protect
Shakespeare said, "Me think thou protest too much."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, what are they afraid of, right?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the lawsuit. Basically, the lawsuit contends that Speaker, MAGA Mike Johnson's refusal to administer the oath is not a legitimate procedural
Well, and you know why they argue that, Shant? You know why they argue that? Because it isn't. He doesn't have a right. That's why they argue that, right? So and his response to this lawsuit, Shant, was quote unquote, "Good luck with that." That's his response. Well, let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, how this lawsuit's going to turn out. Poorly for you. You're going to come in second place.
It basically asks the court to declare that if he refuses to do his job and swear her in, that someone else authorized by federal law should be permitted to administer their oath and seat her. This is not a controversial thing. It's not like there's some question as to, like I said, certified election results. Nobody is disputing that she won the election. It's absolutely absurd that she's been out of the office.
I want to add a couple little tidbits to this, little trivia tidbits to this, which is based on the research I read. One of the things is they've given her an office. Every member of Congress gets an office. But because she's not a seated member of Congress, she can't come in after hours. She can't come in early. And she has to go through the same process any citizen would go through if they wanted to visit Congress, right? Yeah. So that's one of the things that they've done to her. And if you take this to its illogical extreme, it would mean the speaker could simply pick and choose who he or she wants to seat or not seat when he or she wants to seat them, which is, of course, utterly ridiculous. So
it's so contrary to democracy. It's so contrary to our system and the Constitution. You know what the other problem is, Brian, is that this district that Adelita Grijalva is supposed to represent, they basically have no representation in Congress. Right. This is a fundamental problem that the whole reason for the American Revolution occurred. The taxation without representation. They basically, it's not like somebody else is in there. It's not like, the incumbent is in there and they're trying to oust him and seat her or something. They have no representation in Congress. I mean, I think that's a big problem. It's wholly contrary to the basic principle of American democracy. This is why the American Revolution happened. Because
you took the words out of my mouth, Shant. That's exactly what I was going to say. And here's my last comment on this, which is I predict that Johnson is going to fold when he sees the writing on the wall with this lawsuit, when orders start coming from the courts or indication. He's going to then come up with some garbage excuse.
Yeah.
He's going to say, well, we can do it today. I'm going to happen to be in Washington. I can do it today if she's there. It's going to be something like that. And then it's going to be the Democrats' fault. And why didn't she just ask nicely? And it's going to be some garbage like that I think people, except for about 30% of the country, are starting to absolutely see through. So that's my last thought.
Well, it's super interesting. We'll keep up to date, see what happens with this lawsuit. Let's see how it shakes out. I agree. It's going to be something like that where they chicken out at the last minute because that's what they do. And we'll see if that happens. We'll report back on that and share our thoughts on that. If there's a ruling by the court, we'll try to unpack that for you. This has been another installment of Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. Remember, you like this content, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share this with whoever you think would find this entertaining or find this informative. I don't know if anyone finds either of us entertaining, but I hope at least you find it informative. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.